Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Around the Coin. Today, we're coming in with a lot of energy. We just had a fantastic pre-show conversation with the three of us back together, Brian Fessel and myself, Mike Townsend, here on the mic. Brian, we'll kick it off to you first, man. Actually, let's go to Faisal, since it's been a while since I've talked to Faisal.
We got to hear from him.
More importantly, Faisal has got a bunch of around-the-world trips coming up. Faisal, what's new with you, my man?
Good morning, gentlemen. Nothing much. Glad to be back over here with the three amigos. It's been a while. Been traveling a little, not too much. I think the travels will start, piling up once the spring sets in, which is just around the corner in this part of the world. But otherwise, all is good. Can't complain. How about you guys?
So you're probably putting on more airline miles than anyone else I know. What are you doing? Are you doing over 100,000 miles?
No. Well, I think last year was pretty close, but not 100K. This year, I might just break that. But because
100K kilometers.
100,000 miles.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but let's see. I don't know. Let's see. But I think this year would be good. Maybe get upgraded to one of those platinum statuses, right?
There you go.
Well, it must be nice flying in first class all the time. Brian, you've been, what have you been up to? Snowboarding, skiing, building apps, hacking patents. What's new in the life of Brian?
Present something I saw on Business Insider, and it is just absolutely amazing. It is called Quora Was My Savior. Online communities are supercharging people's career, and it is featuring our very own Faisal Khan. And it is a really well-written piece about how Faisal rose above the noise level at Quora and literally built himself into what I believe is one of the most in-demand knowledgeable individuals about international commerce and remittances and payments to be found. And so I encourage all of our listeners to go and reach out to Business Insider. We'll have a link in the notes. And this is Faisal using his empirical praxis and extending his knowledge around the world there. There you go.
Hey, but I have to say thank you, and thank you, Brian, because you actually taught me what empirical praxis is all about.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Well, I have to say, we should do an episode at some point, Faisal, on just your techniques for growing your independent brand. Every time I talk to you about this, you've always got some gems to drop on, whether it's using IFTTT to scrape Twitter and post to your WordPress and integrate with Evernote. I mean, you've got the system so dialed in. I'd love to, at some point, expose some of those secrets.
He's a master.
I would love to tell, but I tell you, I think the one takeaway I want to give to everyone is persistency. You have to be persistent, and you have to treat it as a job. You have to give it the seriousness it deserves. Everyone can do it. The thing is, we get lost in the noise. We're doing something serious, and a funny cat video would come up, and all distraction comes in. But if you can get past that and you put in the effort, everyone can do it. I'm not an exception.
You know what? The thing is, and this is a segue to some stuff I've been doing. The thing is that people get, I call it the paralysis of analysis. What people will do is they'll sit back. If they don't have a beard, they'll grow a beard, male or female, and they start stroking their beard wondering, should I do this? Can I do this? What will they say? And they will paralyze themselves analyzing this. What I say is you jump in and do it. And Quora is that opportunity for you to not only stick your toe, to dive into the pond and to start producing. And that leads up to what has really blown my mind. I released an app recently. It's called Read Multiplex. It's the basis of the Multiplex magazine and the Multiplex memorandum, which is a subscriber-based system, but the app is free, and 90% of the content out there is free other than the magazine and the memorandum. And, I built it because of Quora. I mean, I started putting content out there. I started having people contact me. I've lost literally count of the contracts and relationships and things that have come from it. Book offers. I got to the White House based
White
on
House,
Quora.
yeah.
Investments. I have. We're running now to over $2.5 billion worth of investments I helped direct because of people contacting me and getting quote unquote deal flow. I didn't know what deal flow was 5 years ago. Now everybody wants my deal flow about voice first. Anyway, I put this app out because people were asking me, your stuff is all around the internet now. It's not just on Quora. How can we centralize it? And I thought about it and I said, I can make a WordPress page, but nah, everybody's on their mobile devices. So I'll build an app. So I built the app pretty much from the ground up. I used a lot of different extensions, so I didn't write all the code, but it's my ugly code. I take full responsibility over if you love it or hate it. And I used it for a couple of reasons. I wanted to have a central point for push notifications, not to become annoying in people's lives. But I noticed from being on Twitter and certainly on Quora when I was writing pieces on breaking news that people were just wanting to hear about things when they were happening. And certainly my clients who were paying me a substantial amount of money to be in front of the ball, sometimes 2 or 3 years ahead, they're saying, I need instant notifications. So I said, the app makes sense. So Apple and Android, iOS and Android, have this ability for you to, when you build an app with permission, so if you download this app, don't turn off the notifications because I won't annoy you, I won't track you. And I send out notifications on things that I think are important for that particular moment. And I try to limit to myself. I don't think I've ever sent out more than 3 in a day. I warn you, there might be 5, but they will all be very important and they will lead and link directly to the content. And this is very important. It's a very unique aspect of my app is I can put out a tweet or a Quora posting. And even though it's my app, when you click on the notification, it will bring you right to the tweet or right to the Quora posting that I'm pointing out to. So
deep link.
Yeah, it's a deep linking system. Very few people know it exists. I'm sort of pioneering that. I've had some really very people I respect in technology saying, how in the heck are you doing that? What else is going on with the app? The app is, this is what's blowing my mind. I got to thank everybody. We're in the top 25 of magazine and newspaper category for internet and computer, which is the general category of anything technology based. Top 25. There's hundreds.
I'll say, Brian, your detail on patents just blows my freaking mind. The fact that you can go through those. I mean, you put a lot of it on Quora, and I feel like that's honestly where I originally years ago started diving into some of your content was on just what is. I mean, it's amazing. I think people don't give it credit just because it's like reading the terms of service on some company because it's just so boring for the layperson. But when you tear it apart and you pull out the gems, it's like it's a needle in a haystack. And I think those insights are just really interesting. Whether you're in it for a business purpose or just kind of wondering what the future of Apple technology looks like, as among others. It's really, 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 I encourage you to dive into that more and more.
Mike. I can tell you about the patents and we'll segue on, but the thing that I've been doing for decades, I've been reading patents since the 1980s. I used to have to go to the library. I used to go to Princeton University Library, and they would have, it would be delayed. It wouldn't be instant. I think it would be every quarter. You would get not the complete patents, but some of them. And then later on, they got the microfiche. And then I could actually read all the details of the patent. So there I was, a little kid, snot-nosed kid in front of a microfiche machine reading patents. And people would come up to me, what are you doing? I go, I'm just learning about technology. See, the thing was, when even today, if you really want to understand technology, reading about it from people who write about it, it's interesting, and I love a lot of the writers. But these are people that are writing about ex post facto. These are people writing that things are already going to come. That's not good enough for me. I want to see I want to be in the mind of the inventor, the creator, because those are the people that are making the changes in the world. And a lot of people think it's a waste of time because, quote unquote, this is the famous last words that you will hear from anybody. Most patents never become products, and that's right. The skill in this is to be be able to look at things and to look at the gravity that will wind up pulling these things into products. And if you don't study them enough, everything looks kind of off the wall, and is like, is that ever going to happen? But I study about 29 companies or their patents. I talk publicly mostly about Apple. With my subscribers, I'm going to start talking more deeply about Amazon. And that particular segment, because of Mike motivating me here in prior conversations, I'm probably going to extend another feature, and that will be a breakdown of a patent. I can't guarantee every week or every day when they are most appropriate. I'll break them down for subscribers in better detail, not quite the detail a client would get because they're spending hundreds, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars.
You mean millions of dollars?
Yeah, well,
one thought too is you could go in and do like a YouTube video just dissecting it. I think the intimidating thing, well, I'll give you full acknowledgement and credit on the ability, or just saying that it's there's a gold mine there. It's just so cumbersome to go through all that and to have someone just tear it apart and make predictions on interpreting what some of the language means. I think that's. Brian, you should keep diving in there. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing with trademarks too. So get ready for that. I've never really exposed publicly my trademark skills, and this is companies that file trademarks, and it goes unnoticed by almost everybody. And really very smart companies wind up filing trademarks sometimes 3-4 years before products ever result. And so I'm going to start talking about that. What have you been up to, Mike? What's this last week been looking like?
Well, we made a big announcement on Home Hero, kind of came forward and publicly announced that we're transitioning the company into a new direction. Haven't announced the new direction, but it was good to, make that announcement.
You're teasing us. Really, what's the new direction? Can we give us any hint?
I'm going to have to pull a Brian here and just say, I'd love to tell you.
I just wanted to hear you say that. Hit that drum. Hit that drum back there.
We're going to keep our mission of staying, with improving health and wellness in the home.
I love it.
So, we want to keep our same driving force and momentum, but just, go after a model that has the potential to really grow and be massively successful.
And can I ask, is this because of regulations that you're changing your focus?
Yeah. What happened? Can we talk about that a little?
Yeah, sure. It's all out in the open now.
Okay.
And we'll link to the Medium article we posted. But effectively regulation had a key role. But I'm not going to take away the other factors and the things that went into it. I mean, it's never, everyone wants the one quick and easy answer, but I don't think it's there. I think W-2 versus the independent contractor model, W-2 makes it very, very hard to do a number of things that are required for scaling a technology company or even services company to a really big scale. And I think you kind of see that reflection across the home care industry. It's very fragmented. It's very relationship driven. The only companies to really get to a big scale are franchises, which, they don't actually own the individual companies. So W-2 presents a lot of increased taxes, payroll, logistical challenges. But there's also been some regulation on minimum wage requirements, overtime requirements that put increased pressure on families to come up with more money, to come up with, just greater restrictions on the caregivers in the home. So I think the pendulum has sort of swung in the last 4 years towards a more highly regulated climate. And, for us, we really need to go after something where we can view technology as being a key component to scaling a business. In home care, I think one of the things we underestimated was the impact that technology from other vendors had on the other 25,000 agencies. People like to look at it and say it's Home Team, Honor, and Home Hero, but the reality is there's 25 other extremely efficient, hardworking, technology-enabled agencies on the ground floor in every little, mom and pop neighborhood across the country. And so to go across and uproot them, you really have to have something amazingly, powerfully different, and technology has to be driving that. And I think that's a myth. That doesn't truly exist. And so we named the article, There's No Magic in Venture-Backed Home Care, because I really believe that there's not. And so we need to make a decision that was best for our team and for our investors. And that'll be going in a new direction, which there's plenty of opportunities in healthcare, and improving health and wellness as a home is a never-ending challenge. So we wanted to take the remaining cash we have, which is plenty, and go after something bigger and more meaningful where we can make a bigger impact.
Let me ask
now,
you
Mike, I got
one question.
Go ahead.
How is it a 180 or is it a or just a slight variation from what you're doing today?
It's a big change. It's not home care, so we won't be hiring caregivers. We won't be sending them in the homes. We'll be working on things that improve health and wellness in the home. But as far as hiring W2 caregivers, we moved away from that.
I got to commend you, Mike. You've been fearless and bold in the past about not and very open and transparent about certainly this and some of your other enterprises. That is something that I think is so rare. The fact that you're able to sort of be upfront, why are you changing all these different things? I think it goes and educates the next generation of entrepreneurs who sometimes, I've had people that have had to do pivots and change of direction, and they feel embarrassed. They feel like they've let themselves and everybody down. And it's quite the opposite. I think what you're doing is the right thing, is that you're moving in a direction of where you need to be rather than trying to bang on the door of something that may not ever open. Right?
Yeah.
So
I sort of think the easiest decision is just to keep doing what you're doing. And, we could have gone, we had $12 million in cash. We could have gone, years and just everything looks great in the outside. Meanwhile, our individual, economics on a micro scale just don't make sense. This is the tragedy of HomeJoy, right? They realized, far too late that, hey, look, this business model just doesn't make sense. And we're acquiring, users that aren't paying and covering the cost per acquisition. And so do you just keep going and just wait, or do you make a tough decision? And I think that the best move is the hardest one.
Now, I got to ask it. I don't know if this is crossing lines. It's structurally, how does it feel with investors? Because investors ostensibly came in and invested in, of course, you and your team, but they also invested in a business idea and direction. How does that play out? Can you give us some color about what that is like and the challenges involved?
Yeah, we have a really supportive board. They share a lot of the same opinions that I just mentioned with regard to going after the biggest opportunity and making tough decisions and pivots when necessary. So I'd say, they're fully supportive. They want to see us go after something that we really can make a real impact on. And I think they just fully support the acknowledgement that, worst case scenarios, you just know it's the wrong decision, but it puts you in a comfortable life situation. So you just keep doing it, keep wasting cash, keep wasting people's time and effort. And overall, if the next venture turns out to be a massive success, we would have realized that, hey, look, that wouldn't have happened if we just kept going. So
exactly,
that's kind of how we look at it.
Is it an interactive conversation with the board? If we can get a little insight, is it like, I have some ideas, what do you guys think, or do you present an actual end-to-end one choice? This is the direction you want to go in. How does that play out for a startup?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I'm sure it's individual, it's specific to people in a room. I always say to Kyle, my co-founder, whenever we're looking at big companies and the decisions they make, it's just guys and girls in a room. It's 4 to 6 people, executives in a company, whether it's PayPal buying another company, or whether it's Google, or whether it's us. It's just people in a room making decisions. And so we're sitting in the room. We're looking at a board meeting. We're just, looking at all the financials, putting all the pieces together. And, we had lightly brought up the topic originally at our last board meeting in 2016. And we had made this change, a greater than 3 weeks ago, and we just hadn't announced it until today. And so, when we went through that board meeting, we sort of tested the waters to see, one of our board members suggested, hey, what if we built technology and powered other home care agencies? And so that was an insight into, okay, look, he's flexible. If we were to change business models, I don't think that would be, that wouldn't hit him too hard. It wouldn't be too abrupt of a change. And so we kind of talked about that, and we said, well, we're not really in a good position to build technology for other agencies, that requires years of specialized product development and a different infrastructure and, yada, yada. So we basically said, look, let's go back to the drawing board and see what does this look like if we play out potential pilots. Now, the one thing I'll say too is we had a few pilots. We had multi-million-dollar contracts with health systems where they were going to pay us to offer home care services to their patients. And when we were about to sign that contract, that was in November, December timeframe, we said, look, if we do this, we're going to be in home care, spending greater than what we're spending now, building on these pilots for the next a minimum 18 months, more likely 2 years, 3 years. And so that was really the forcing function that said, look, if we sign this contract, this pilot, we're not going to have an escape route. And so that really put the pressure on us to say, where is this going? How do the financials really look? What are the macro changes we've seen over the last couple of years? What are some other interesting opportunities we've seen in healthcare? And we just, spent a full couple of days and just dove in and said, we think there's much bigger opportunities elsewhere, especially with the pendulum swinging on regulatory changes.
Wow. So this is, I think, I direct everybody to go read the Flow Tab piece that Mike wrote, and I think anybody thinking about doing a startup and having the ability to move bold and swiftly should read Mike's piece on Medium about this. And I think it's more Home Hero. I think it's going to be very important for history that more people do this, because we're living through a very interesting time for startups. Obviously, it's all going to change in the next 5 years, but this is a really interesting period, and I think kudos for you for doing that. Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing I say is there's so much opportunity in the world that you have to be working on your best idea at all times, and if that changes, no shame in it, just change. So that's kind of how we look at it. We're super optimistic about the next thing, and you just move on. But yeah, let's dive into the show. I mean, we have such great content. I want to get into it. So one of the first things, Brian, kind of transitioning from your conversation there, is Amazon hitting the 10,000 skills, and which kind of represents a big milestone for Amazon Alexa. The piece we mentioned pre-show was that they don't have any monetization built on top of those skills, and so I know you sensed a little bit of hesitation from the developer community by releasing so many skills, but then not having a way to monetize that. What's your sort of stance in the Alexa environment today with that announcement?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, this is really a big milestone. It's really good news, but it's really not. I wouldn't say bad news. It's a problem that needs to be solved, and probably solved by the startup community, not Amazon, Google, or Apple, or anybody else. I call it a Google class opportunity, and I see about 20 of them in the voice first world, and we'll see what that all means 10 years from now. But trust me, this is a Google class problem. So what do we have? We're at 10,000 units. Now, most of those skills, I don't want to say most of them. Most of those skills are not what we would call full apps. All right, and if we want to use that sort of vernacular and understanding what they're doing, but they are developers that took time and built something. I've done research. This is an ongoing study. I've analyzed about 5,000 skills randomly, and this is a study for a client. I hope to publish a lot of this, and I hope to talk a lot more about it, because I've drawn insights that are just not seen anywhere else. So I'm not just speculating here. I'm actually going to talk from empirical praxis. Where's that drum? All right. So there you go. So here's the thing. About 50% of the skills are never going to be used again. And there's a couple of reasons why. Some of those skills are abandonware or zombie skills. Essentially, somebody built them. It got approved by Amazon. It got put out there, and it just kind of sits out.
It's like apps in the App Store, though. I feel like the long tail in apps in the App Store is huge.
Yeah, it's closer to the Android App Store than the iOS App Store, because you go to the Android App Store, you go way back, and there's cobwebs and crickets back there. Something was released on Ice Cream Sandwich or whatever the hell it was, the first OS systems, and they still got the app zombieing in the background. But anyway, and that's also another problem is how these stores maintain themselves. So let me identify a couple of the real big issues here. Issue number one is, what does an app store look like in the voice first world? And in the most recent issue of the Multiplex magazine, my subscription magazine, go and get it now. I'll say it again, go get it now. And the next issue is going to be about this very subject, and that is surfacing and discovery. How does one find an app for a voice first scenario. I have some ideas, and I'm going to be exposing and those ideas, not all of them, but a great coalescing of some of these ideas in the next issue. But I'll talk about some of them now. What I don't want to do is I don't want to go to an app on my smart device, look at what that voice skill is doing by reading about it and looking at a pretty picture, right? You got to make an icon for a voice first app in the App Store, right? And then you got to read about it, and then you got to read about how to the invocation of that skill. That's not going to scale. It never will scale. And that is the quagmire or almost a crisis that Amazon is facing as we're above 10,000 skills today. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is there's no monetization system. So in the 50% of those apps, of the 10,000 apps that are up there, right, most of the reasons why they are no longer really, they're sort of abandonware and zombieware, is the developer had no incentivization to continue on the development of that app to make it live and vibrant. And so without a monetization path, there's not going to be a vibrant developer community. That's another challenge in quagmire. And again, I will be addressing that in issue 2 of Multiplex Magazine. And I will say this, that you cannot use the App Store model that we are used to at Android and iOS. It does not make any sense. Why? Because a really good app, a voice app, a really good voice skill continues to learn, continues to get more neurons. It should, anyway. And then it needs to interconnect to other neurons or other skills. Some people might think that's an API connection. Again, I have my own theories on how that's going to play out. Again, this is all speculative because nobody's worked on it yet. And that's why it is a startup opportunity.
Do you think they'll have basic subscriptions where, I go in every morning, I listen to the NPR news update. Would they just basically say, hey, look, freemium time is over. It's $1 a month to maintain the subscription. It seems like a very basic monetization strategy.
That's one. And I would call that not the low-hanging fruit, but the fruit that this hit the ground. So you don't even have to reach to pick it up. It's right there, right? So, yeah, subscriptions is one model. But I would say that if we just stopped at subscriptions, that we would not, put it this way, the company that stops at subscriptions is missing an enormous opportunity.
Do you think the other one is just like the App Store where you're just buying something?
No.
Apple takes money on subscriptions and they take money on upfront costs.
I've thought about this since the late 1980s. There are 57 monetization units that you can do in Voice First. Subscriptions is one, and there's a
upfront cost is a second.
Well, no. Upfront cost is really a bad model because it really doesn't really play well with the concept of what a voice app is ultimately going to do, because a voice app needs to continue to know its environment and continue to learn, and that's going to take more skills, it's going to take more programming, and it just doesn't make sense. You would have to charge, perhaps for some skills, way too much money up front to continue to fund that operation. So it's not like a game, right? There are voice games, blah, blah, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about things that are really going to solve, the killer apps, right? These things are going to require ongoing life, and those monetizations don't work. But within subscriptions, and I'm not including this in my 50-odd monetization units, in subscriptions there are about 20 variations of subscriptions, and there's some interesting things inside of that, but just a black and white subscription service could be untenable, because even with a trial capability, because of how a lot of these skills only make sense sometimes of the day, sometimes of the week or month.
What other monetization strategies are out there or top of mind, do you think?
You're gonna have to read the magazine to get some of that, but let's just say this: if in fact my theory is correct, and I know it's correct, not out of arrogance, it's just the way of gravity. I don't need to check gravity. It's going to happen. The theory that one skill is going to talk to another skill, there is power in that synergy, and that's one. And synergy is 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2; it equals a higher number. And so that means that you may, in fact, make another skill more valuable by the virtue that you've connected through a neuron connection in unity between these two. And it looks a little bit like an affiliate model, but that's not doing it justice. And it really does take a magazine-grade analysis of some of this stuff to really understand it. From a programmer standpoint, from a consumer standpoint, they would get it instantly. They know that if this talks to that, it would cost a little bit of this, and
So
there's value.
let me ask you this: what is the Qualcomm building Alexa into their products? What does that say about the sort of the shift in?
Unbelievable, Mike. It's unbelievable. Why? Because to listen to a wake word, the battery profile.
First, Brian, give us the. I don't know if I did it justice there on that news cap. Qualcomm said, "Hey, we're going to build in Alexa into our audio Bluetooth devices." What is the significance of this?
So what it basically means is that the low energy devices, BLE devices that they're going to be building this into, are the chips, means that any developer building anything that has any audio component, which Qualcomm is pretty much dominating that for wireless headsets and speakers, means that they can integrate an Alexa impression inside that device. How they do that is very simple. The system, through very low energy consumption, if it's battery powered, it uses trickle energy to look for the envelope, the voice envelope of the word Alexa. When it hears that word, then it activates the CPU, or the major part of the system on chip, and then it's using this traditional power structure inside that device to activate the Alexa capability within that device. And that's pretty much taking the vocal envelope and sending it over the internet and getting a result back. And that's all an API that's very easy to use and is already out there. So
for your average consumer, that means
Alexa is going to be everywhere. Alexa is going to be in washing machines, dryers, cars, everywhere, because it will cost the developers nothing from a cognitive response, meaning how do I integrate this? It will cost them nothing from a battery profile system, meaning when you're building electronic devices, you want them to last X number of hours with no battery charges. If you needed to put Alexa into an audio headset that was wireless, prior to this deep integration of Alexa wake words into the Qualcomm chipsets, you would have had to have sacrificed maybe an hour or two of battery life of maybe a 12-hour battery system. Now you're sacrificing maybe 12 to 16 minutes over a 12-hour period of battery life. I'm giving a theoretical battery life. So the battery profile is near zero, and then the power of being able to already have that in the chip, all the software being written for you, and you just hand it off to the Alexa API, means that you can now add the value of Alexa inside of your whatever you're building. And again, it's not just wireless headsets. Everybody thinks, well, that's another headphone. No, it means cars. It means doors, front doors. Over the arc of 10 years, you're going to be seeing a lot of people asking the door to open or unlock, probably open and unlock, and garage doors, all kinds of things like that. And again, these are the beginnings of it. So it's a historic first. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the potential of 500 million to 1 billion devices just in 2017 that this could be in.
Wow,
So
that's huge. Man, I feel like we can go into Alexa, or I shouldn't say her name because she's going to come alive.
I know.
Right downstairs. But Faisal, let me get you in, because I really want to get to the conversation we had pre-show around which was just fascinating, around PayPal strategy, announcing that they're buying the TIO networks for $233 million. What's the lesson here? What's going on?
So TIO is basically a company that has agent locations all over America, and unbanked people can go there, or even banked people can go there. There's no restriction, and you can essentially pay your bill. So they're a bill payment company. They have access and tied into all the bill payers, the super billers. There are about 350 or so super billers in America. So and there are only like 3 or 4 companies that offer bill payment services. TIO is one. The other one is Fiserv, FIS Global, and maybe 1 or 2. But basically, if you want to do bill payment services for utility companies, gas, phone, cable, etc., you just go to a TIO agent, pay, and your bill's done. So here's the first time where PayPal, if you were to look at a river, and on one side of the river is the PayPal ecosystem where everyone is banked, and on the other side of the river is the unbanked. PayPal just bought both sides of the river, and now I think they will eventually do something to bridge the gap, offer these unbanked people the ability to get some sort of a pseudo banking access. Maybe they will even give them a Venmo account and say, hey, listen, if you load the money on Venmo, we will tie in the API for TIO for bill payment into Venmo directly, and you don't even have to visit an agent to pay a bill or stand in line. You can just use it over there. So it's the first time where PayPal now has access to about 14 million customers. Not just customers, they have access to their historical data, how they spend, where they are, the demographics, the amount of bills they're paying. And I think that's really liquid gold for them, because they can now make more products and target them.
And it seems to me it's such a no-brainer win for consumers, right? I mean, if you can't get a bank account for whatever reason, and you're walking in every week to a TIO, local merchant or building, and you're standing in line with cash, I mean, just that whole experience, I'm sure, anyone who's no one has time to just, go and pay bills in cash standing in line, and the ability to just say, hey, look, you can now download this Venmo account or PayPal account, and you can pay, even though you're unbanked, you can pay all your utility bills or cable or whatever you're paying, and you could do it electronically and automatically. I mean, that's effectively bringing banking type services to the unbanked, right?
Well, Mike, it's easier said than done. I mean, there are two
as always.
There are two sides to this coin. One is that when these services were offered and were started, when the unbanked population, it's not that the unbanked population came in the last 10 years, they've always been there. These services were not, the smartphones were not there, right? So these services were offered over feature phones, SMS, etc., and you still had to go in lines and so forth. And many of them still prefer to go to these so-called stores, check cashers, etc., because they offer a better service than the banks, because banks are asking more money, they're deducting money just for maintaining an account, etc. The second part is that I think it's inevitable that as the population grows, traffic grows, smartphone penetration grows, APIs, accessibility to billing data, accessibility to banking data, payment data, I think it's inevitable that we'll see a convergence point, and that convergence point would mean taking these unbanked from an analog situation into a digital situation. We already see some flavors of it, but I think what we'll start seeing more and more is that the individual islands or companies who are offering products individually in their own ecosystems will start talking to each other. So you will have, not just an unbanked client who has a debit card, so suddenly he has access to the banking network, he has access to PayPal, Venmo, bill payment, stored value, money transfer services. So I think this is the low-hanging fruit. And it's a low-hanging fruit that is limited by supply in the United States, So I think it goes without saying. This is something people think, oh, well, there's so many unbanked. No, they're not really that many unbanked, but I don't know, 20, 30 million people are unbanked, but that's it.
Well, I was gonna say some numbers here are, PayPal bought TIO for $233 million. TIO processed $7 billion in bill payments last year. They have 14 million customers, and the customers are paying, and they have 65,000 retail locations, so companies they're working with, which means, I think we did the highly sophisticated math prior, but effectively $16 per acquisition, per customer acquisition, assuming you convert 100%, which more realistically say it's 70.
Here's the thing, if you look at Zoom, which is another PayPal company, the cost of acquisition is closer to $40 or $45 for an international transfer. For a local unbanked person who's wanting to pay bills, $16 is a godsend. In the most competitive environments that I know for cross-border, and I can speak with relative confidence about cross-border, the cost of acquisition is between $10 and $12. And that's the most competitive I have ever seen. So 16, considering, not bad at all.
Let me ask you this, Faisal. Where is TIO making their money? Are they taking a percentage of the transaction from the customer to the retail location?
Yes, they do. So they have an agreement with the utility companies. The utility companies don't have to open all these service centers where people have to go and pay bills. So foot traffic is reduced over there. They have a wider reach. They have an agreement that, hey, listen, if we get the money, maybe we'll do some revenue sharing on it, or maybe for every bill we process, you pay us $1.25 or something. So that's how they make the money.
Interesting.
But
I got to ask Faisal.
But one thing you have to understand, it's TIO by itself had reached its plateau. They couldn't offer anything else without partnering up or being acquired by someone else.
That's what I was going to ask. They sort of reached the zenith of this, right?
Yeah.
There's how many players are in the market? We were talking about this pre-show. It's really interesting. Shed some insight on how these companies were built for Fiserv, and let's go through all that.
I'm not sure how many players there are. I mean, Walmart is perhaps one of the biggest ones with Green Dot and the Green Dot card, and they're trying to address the unbanked market. There are some very specific players who operate in a very restricted geography. New York is one. I forgot the name of the company, but while we're having this conversation, I'll search for it. And they just serve the unbanked population in Manhattan, basically. But all these are heading towards what I call going from bill payment to pseudo banking. Not actually opening a bank account, but offering almost all the services that you need in banking. And what are those services? The basic ones, if you don't go into house loans or rents and so forth, etc., or savings deposits, etc. The basic services are bill payment, a place to park your cash, an address where people can send money to, which is basically a bank account and routing number, and more importantly, the ability to do person-to-person payments, which, if the light bulb hasn't gone off yet, you should know that PayPal already does. So it's a great acquisition for TIO. It's a great buy for PayPal.
And I think it also is going to cement the PayPal brand much deeper in so many people's lives, not just unbanked or underbanked. I believe that just the ability to pay, do banking functions inside your PayPal account to pay your electric bill, mortgages and everything like that is going to be extremely powerful. I also think it is laid a deep moat that companies like Square and other person-to-person companies are going to have a very difficult time crossing to try to validate themselves beyond.
Yeah, I wonder. Brian, to your point, I wonder if the other companies are on the chopping block now, where TIO's. You mentioned the two other companies, Faisal. I wonder if they're getting phone calls now to be bought up before there's none left.
Actually, they don't. Actually, they don't, because the other two are pure data play. They don't own any agent networks. They don't process payments. They provide billing data to banks, to all the 8,000 banks and so forth. So they don't even compete. In this particular case, TIO was a monster by itself.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So do you see this hurting? Like I'm seeing it, a lot of person-to-person payment systems, because they really don't look like they're going to grow in scale as the cohort of young users get older, and it just makes less use case.
Well, the way I see it is, I think it's from a strategy point of view, PayPal has said, or someone in PayPal has said, hey guys, fine, what about the unbanked? What are we doing about the unbanked? And then someone must have said, well, what unbanked? And that's exactly where the conversation got started, Exactly my point. What about? And we don't even know that there is an unbanked population out there. And they looked at it, and they had to see who could they possibly acquire that has a vast network, that has a distribution setup, that is able to process bills and payments from where they can get historical data about the customers, where they can have a pretty decent swath of customer acquisition, and I think TIO came down on this thing on all. It came down hard because they had checked everything that PayPal wanted, and I think PayPal is doing a big service to the unbanked population, and in many ways, just it's like one of those final 4 by 100 relays, and PayPal got past the baton, and it's the last 100 meters. And guess what? I think they will take the lead because, like I said, it's not like the unbanked population is in millions and millions. It's a few 10 millions, and they've got a chunk of it now. And I think if they do
that's fascinating. And
if they do a good product, people will gravitate towards them.
Of course.
And I loved it when you were describing what the kind of the details. And I was just looking at the original founder story. It looked like Hamid Shabazi he founded it in 1997 after he graduated from school with a civil engineering degree at University of British Columbia, and he started it and explaining like kind of the details. It's not very complex. The business model is fairly simple, which, companies like your utility company or your cable company, they're just going to put together a list of individual customers, due dates, amount that the person owes, and some other parameters. And they're just going to have a check that says, did he pay or didn't he pay? And when they send the invoice out, if you don't have a bank, you can't pay it. So they basically facilitate the payment for the unbanked by saying, hey, look, these guys can't sign up for these services. So we're going to integrate, we're going to create a bank account, or not an account, but we're going to create an account with the utility company, TIO says, and we're going to integrate with the software system of the utility company, which is through the bill payment network, to say, hey, that customer paid this bill because we got paid through their local store. So cash goes in to the customer, to the TIO network. TIO network's account through the utility company gets bigger, and then they take a transaction for that. And I feel like it's an inspiring story in the sense of how they scaled such a simple model.
People tend to forget in the payments ladder, the lowest rung is person-to-person payments. One up is bill payments, mobile top-ups and bill payments. And then you go into things like mortgage, loan, etc., etc. By the way, the company I was talking about that does unbanks for New York is called Right Checking, and that's right spelled with RITE, Right Check Cashing. So those are the guys that handle the unbanked in Manhattan. And likewise, I think PayPal's got a great buy, and it's not a complex product, but it is one that can be molded and interfaced with the existing products that PayPal has, and can be a win for those 14 million people.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And so kind of transitioning, you can see this pattern emerge where Alibaba's Ant Financial bought MoneyGram for $80 million?
Yeah.
And so it's a similar kind of play, right? In one sense, from a macro perspective, they're purchasing a local brick and mortar money, not money transmitter, but money facilitator. Brian,
money sender.
Well, they are a money transmitter, but it's not local. Yeah. It's local to 220 countries, right?
Yeah. And we talked about this pre-show, and Faisal really kind of showed the arc of this. Most of these companies have reached sort of a plateau, and in a sense, MoneyGram had very few places to go as far as the market. And obviously, there are startups like TransferWise and others that are going to start really eating at their prime basis over the arc of the next 10 years. But what we're seeing now is the possibility of this becoming something much more dramatic and much more dynamic. The ability, when you look at what Alibaba is and what Alipay is about, it could be about making purchases for products or commercial purchases to manufacturers in China. It can do away with the letter of credits. It can do away with a whole lot of things that normally arise with these types of transactions. But I think Faisal had some great insights early pre-show about parts of the world where there is no ability to do transactions at all, right?
Well, I mean, let's look at MoneyGram, right? So MoneyGram was losing money, pun intended, and also they had their stock price go so low that they had to, bundle it up. So 5 shares had to be 1 share or something like that, just to stay on the stock exchange. So this was a godsend for them. MoneyGram does not do business to business, which is very surprising. MoneyGram is purely a P2P player, unlike Western Union that does do business-to-business payments, unlike RIA that does do business-to-business payments, and so forth. And I think it's also important to note MoneyGram was not innovating. MoneyGram was in an industry where the average price of transfer, the transfer fees, has been going down and down and down. So what do? How do you innovate a money transfer company into a payments company that has suddenly access to other markets and other usages without building a product? Well, the only thing was either you acquire someone, as was the case with PayPal buying TIO, or get acquired. So this was a big surprise. Everyone kept saying it in hindsight. Oh yeah, we all knew MoneyGram was going to be acquired.
Of course, yeah.
Yes, but we didn't know it was going to be acquired by a Chinese company, right? So suddenly this Chinese company, Ant Financial, which is a separately spun off subsidiary of Alibaba and AliExpress and so forth, has now access to, with banking and money transfer services and licenses and 350,000 agent locations in almost 200 plus countries. That's a big number. So today, if you look at AliExpress, which is one of the largest portals in the world that exports everything, and you can buy one T-shirt to 100,000 T-shirts, you can actually go to a MoneyGram location, pay up for that sale. I think that would be one of the lowest hanging fruits for them. I think doing B2B transactions for Chinese companies will also be coming into play over here. So I think they've got someone basically gave them rubber cement and plugged the hole in their boat, and I think this is a great savior for them. We had Peter Ozer, who came in from MoneyGram. I think it was 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. We
almost
had him on the
2 years,
show. Yeah. So I think I will reach out to him and ask him, how his Mandarin is going and what all the hubbub is all about,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I want to transfer to this last story here, and then we can kind of wrap up. But the Facebook Messenger now lets you send money with TransferWise. And initially we read this, and I think my first reaction at least was, oh, wow, Facebook's integrating with TransferWise. But Faisal, you were distinguishing that to say TransferWise integrated with Facebook Messenger. Facebook, all they did was not kill them. They just said, hey, you can integrate with us, and that kind of is a signal to the world that Facebook is sort of building, not building, but allowing TransferWise to build with Facebook Messenger. Is this part of David Marcus's from PayPal, ex-president of PayPal? Is this part of his grand plan, or what's the story here?
I don't know if it's part of his grand plan, but usually if I have a payment system, I will not let another payment system come in there. It's like having one wife in the bed, and you know how the equation goes, right? So the issue here is Messenger is not a payment platform. It's a messaging platform, and it just happens to have its own payment system as well. Do you shut everyone else out? And if you do, what if the competition offers a messaging platform and allows all the other payment players to operate on it? So I don't think so Facebook had a choice here, and I think they made a very wise decision, if this is going to be the case, that they will allow other players to come and use their messaging bots to do payments. So TransferWise was perhaps the first ones to go onto it. Truth be told, the first one was actually Azimo. Michael Kent from Azimo, he was the first one to do it. He didn't get as much publication and publicity from this thing, but I think TransferWise, with all the investors and the PR outreach that they have, made it big. And it seems like they had the blessing of Facebook Messenger themselves, which is why everyone was reading into it incorrectly, if I may say so. And this is my opinion. I could be wrong. I have no qualms in being wrong. But it seems like Facebook was saying, hey, listen, by the way, you can use Messenger to do TransferWise payments,
I agree to a greater extent. The PR spin was very clear, and that was Facebook is partnering with TransferWise, and it really was TransferWise building out. But the optics below the surface are actually quite a bit dynamic. I can tell you from some sources that there is probably a lot of encouragement on both sides, on both Facebook and TransferWise, to do this sort of thing. And why Facebook didn't do very much to curtail the mania that some people had over the concept. Here's a fact. The fact is Facebook is getting into payments in a very serious way over the arc of the next couple of years. There's no doubt about that. And it's going to be very, very deeply integrated, and it's going to impact retail transactions, going to impact online transactions, and they're finally going to get the right ingredient. And I think this is the beginning of them showing developers that they can come in and work inside this environment. And I also think it's a test case for them to look at who they really want to deeply integrate, in fact, maybe acquire at some point in time.
It's also, I also want to add to what you've said, Brian, that I think it also might be the case where it's to make everyone else jealous, who may be in the payment space, and hence suddenly attract all the developers from the payments world to come and say, hey, use Messenger. The fact of the matter is, WhatsApp has more usage than Facebook Messenger. I've been forced to use Facebook Messenger only because someone in Facebook on the desktop or what have you might have messaged me. But key by key, keystroke by keystroke, I'm more on WhatsApp than on Messenger. So I think they're trying to bring some form of, have a magnet for attracting all the other players to come in.
Do you think there's a consolidation play in the future for Facebook? I mean, what's their vision with WhatsApp to integrate it? To integrate people into Facebook?
You can't have two platforms, right? I mean, we had a WhatsApp upgrade this weekend, and everyone is now, I don't know, I think the internet will go into play and come up with funny names, but basically WhatsApp just turned into an Instagram and a Snapchat.
Yeah, exactly. And the CEO of WhatsApp has made it very clear that WhatsApp is moving headforth into payments, endogenous payments. So you're going to see a lot of activity, and I think ultimately these things are going to merge in one form or another. But, WhatsApp ultimately, the way Facebook has been allowing the business unit to operate, has been ultimately on its own. And to a greater extent, we've also seen that with Instagram.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is how this all plays out against Snap and Snapchat. When you look at the prospectus and the S1, it barely mentions Square. And in fact, what it does mention is that it's very likely to get money transmitter licenses around the world. So
they haven't
there is
shown
another.
up on my radar yet, and I am tracking that. But I'll tell you one thing: I feel that almost everyone, Line, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and everyone else in between have sort of given up the fact that the utopian dream that they were looking at, that content and people would pay for content, people would pay for a penny for your picture like or something. I don't think so that's going to happen. I think they've realized that people don't do that in the real world as it is. No one gives a penny just because they like how a window dressing looks like at some shop, right? So I think
Exactly.
So I think they'll just stick to what works, which is P2P payments, or the ability to have your shopping SKUs within these messaging platforms and being able to buy directly.
Well, I wonder too. I wonder even Instagram is deeply integrated now with the Facebook network. And while it doesn't look like it on the outside, under the hood, if you use the Facebook ad platform, you can choose Instagram as an advertising platform. And so it's it's seamless. It's very integrated. It's very easy to use. Very easy to spend money, I should say, from Facebook's perspective. I wonder if, and I don't know if this is. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts here. Can they look at WhatsApp and say, hey, maybe we can make money just like how we did with Instagram as an advertising platform, where we can kind of read through, the text of your conversations, and we can offer you advertisements based on those conversations. Is that something they're going to do, considering, or is that crossing a line? Because Google does that with Gmail, right?
Maybe I'll give you another thing. So Google is a great example, and Gmail is certainly a great tangential example. Think of what WhatsApp is right now. It's a calling device, it's a calling app, it's a video app, it's a messaging app, and that's about it. Now they've made it a moments app, right? So you can share your moment and what have you. But does it integrate into Facebook the way Facebook has all what on its feed? Certainly not. But then you compare WhatsApp to, let's say, WeChat. It is nowhere close. It doesn't have games. It doesn't have, buy Valentine flowers and send them to someone. It doesn't have shop integration. Doesn't have offline integration, etc. So I think that's the dream that they want to go to. They're just, I think, are probably rolling it out, seeing what the consumer uptake is on this thing, especially when it comes to WeChat and Alipay, because I think they just might get accused of copying it out downright and saying, oh, this is purely, they're getting desperate now. I don't think so. They want to do that. But I think, but I think it goes without saying, it warrants a situation where they need to have more features within the app. They need to have apps within the apps,
Apps within the apps within the apps within the apps. All right, we're going to end just on the 1 hour mark, guys. This has been fantastic conversation.
Mike, I got to throw one thing in here.
Go for it.
It was just brought to my attention. Read Multiplex app is now number 2 in the tech magazines. It just moved up during the show. I don't know if it's karma. We moved from top 20. We're now number 2 in tech or internet and computer, which is tech magazines. Number 5 in business magazines on a Sunday. It's just blowing my mind. So
great. Well, you're gonna have to share some revenue with us.
Absolutely.
All right.
Hey guys, good being on the show. See you next week.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.